Okay, let's keep going. So we talk about correlation coefficient. This kind of study, sometimes they create some very interesting result. Because I drink coffee, so I'll look at this kind of study. And about every week, they will report something like drinking coffee can protect Alzheimer's disease, and I like it because, well, I drink coffee. Right? And sometimes you'll find drinking coffee will have some negative effect on the cardiovascular system. Or if you like drinking wine, well, you'll find more studies about drinking wines can prevent heart disease. And when you look at this data, well, I hope you can go into look at their article. And they found, okay, they use correlational study. Then they should not use this kind of word, protect, prevent, because this is causation. And all they did is correlational study. They will give them ask them questions, how frequently you drink coffee, how frequently you drink wine, and study their chance get cardiovascular disease, they got Alzheimer's disease. That's a correlational study. And they should not use this kind of word. So after you take this class, I hope you are able to identify in your daily life, when you read the article, you read the title, they tell you, okay, they use those causation, I call it causation word, and you found they do the correlational study, you're able to tell your friends, your family, say this is not it's not a causation study, this is a correlation. Correlation means they're related, but it may not be this cause that. And they actually find some errors when they do the correlational study. I'll give you two examples. They found, okay, the ice cream sales and burglary rate are positively correlated. And you say, why the ice cream sales and burglary rate are correlated? Are those burglars, they decide to, okay, eat ice cream first, and then they go to commit a crime, or they commit a crime, they have money, go to eat ice cream? It turned out, no, none of them. And because they're correlated because of the weather. Let's look at next slide. It's because of the weather. So in the summer, people eat ice cream, eat more ice cream, and in the summer, well, more people go on vacation, and those burglars, they know their career, so they'll break into the house more frequently. And it turned out these two become correlated, and the reason is not this caused this or this caused this, it's because of the weather. So this is one example. In the correlational study, you can misinterpret the data and say they're the causation, but it's not the causation. And the other example I like, they found the number of bars and number of pastors in a city that correlated. And you say, why? Huh? Because people go to the church and they found, okay, there's no way they can go to the heaven, so they go to the bar and drink. No, it's not because of that. And if you want to guess, what's the correlation? The answer would be the city size. The city size. In a big city, they have more number of bars because there are more people there, and they also have more number of churches. So it turned out the bars and number of pastors is correlated in the city. So that's when you are not careful in explaining the data, and you may make a mistake and explain the correlational study data, use the causation effect. So that's why I want you to pay attention to the word used in the title. These are the causation words. You have to do the experiment. If it's correlational study, only tell you they're correlated. It doesn't tell you which one caused which, and could be something else. In our biological psychology, we talk about the heredity and environment. Sometimes we call it nature and nurture. So the nature is what you have in your gene. So in your gene, you may have the smart genes, so you're supposed to be very smart, okay? But the environment play a big role as well. So in psychology, we talk about the nurture part, that's the environment. Say this baby is supposed to be smart, but if you don't give them a good environment, it turned out, well, if the baby do this all the time, they won't be able to, they probably won't have the high intelligence when they grow adult, because the alcohol is toxic. It can damage the brain, inhibit brain development. And that's the nature and nurture part. So eventually, especially for human, we'll talk about the human development. The human's brain is not fully cooked after the baby is born. So it takes about 18 years for the brain to fully mature, and some brain area take longer, like the frontal cortex, prefrontal lobe, frontal cortex area. It take longer, 20 years to mature. So in human, the environment is very important. So not just the nature, also the nurture part. And in nature part, okay, we all know this. We have 23 pairs of chromosome. And in those 23 pairs of chromosome, 22 pairs we call them autosome. And the last pair we call it sex chromosome. And we have the male, that's the XY, the female is XX, right? And the male will be this one, the XY, and Y is the one decide it become a male. So the Y chromosome is actually shorter, so they have less gene. The male actually have less genes than female, because the Y chromosome is shorter. And we'll talk about the gender development. The default type is female. So without any stimulus, the embryo will develop into the female. And during the development, if they have the Y chromosome, on the Y chromosome they have a gene called SRY gene. This on the Y chromosome, and it will trigger the male sex hormone production, and turn out the embryo will turn into the male. So without this gene, without testosterone, and the embryo will develop into the default type, which is female. So that's the last pair of chromosome. That's the sex chromosome. And the chromosome, we know the chromosome, it looks like this. This is actually the condensed part. Most of the time we don't see the chromosome condensed like this. And these two parts, we call them telomere. This is associated with aging, because every time the cell divides, the telomere actually gets shorter and shorter. So you can measure the distance of the telomere and know how many more years of your biological age, because when they get short enough, they won't be able to divide. And this part is called the centromere, that's the connecting part, and they have two arms. When you have this, that's when the DNA is about to divide. That's when the cell division is about to happen. And most of the time, these turn loose. And they're like spaghetti, they're called chromatin. So most of the time, the DNA is in the chromatin state. And this, when they are loose, they're able to use those DNA sequence and turn them into RNA, then into protein. So that's the chromatin. So chromatin is those active state. Another example we're going to talk about is memory. In memory, okay, we'll talk about the biological reason why you have memory and what the biological psychologists know about memory. So far we believe, okay, that's in your brain. And your memory, the psychologists tell you could not fully trust your memory. You can have the false memory. Because to form a memory, that's your five senses. They pick up the stimulus from the outside, and this outside information will eventually go to your brain. Right? So your brain, so far we believe there's no specific brain area responsible for memory. And you say hippocampus. Yes, hippocampus, that's the one for memory formation. After they form the memory, it's not stored in hippocampus, it's stored in other brain area. And also amygdala, other limbic area, they associate with emotional memory. So not just hippocampus. And that's why the HM are able to form some memories. They call it motor memory, even though he does not remember it. We'll talk more about it in the memory part. And the memory, how they are formed, we believe so far the memory are stored in the whole brain, not just one brain area. And how the memory formed, so in the brain you have neuron. So these are the neuron. A neuron have a lot of dendrites. Every neuron have 100 of dendrites and 1 axon. Usually they can have more than 1, but usually it's 1 axon and 100 of dendrites. And they will form a connection they call dendritic tree. And this tree can be more and more complicated. So the more you use your brain, and the tree become more and more complicated. And every time you form a new memory, is those tree area, they call it synaptic button. They can grow and connect with other neurons. They form the neural network. And so far, the biologists and psychologists believe your memory is stored in this connection. And this connection is not fixed. It's not fixed. So they can dissociate and connect with other neurons. And this keeps your brain able to form new memory all the time. So you'll always be able to form new memory. But the disadvantage is you will forget something. So if you don't repeat, repetition is the key, and eventually you will forget memory. Okay, so now let's look at the false memory. Because it's all based on the connection, we are able to make this connection happen by giving you the false memory. And you believe it really happened. It turned out it's not true. They call it false memory syndrome. And because the reason you form the memory is because of this. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first example of the false memory syndrome is a psychology experiment. It's done in school, in the college. So they have siblings. And in the psychology class, the professor will ask those older siblings come to the class, say, I'll ask you to do experiment. So your job is when you go home this Thanksgiving or this holiday, you talk to your younger sibling and ask him or her, tell her, oh, do you remember when you were kids, we went to the mall with the mom and you got lost in the mall. And your job is to convince her she got lost. So these siblings, when they go home, they will go to convince they will go to their talk with their siblings, and they're very excited because that's the freshman. The first time you go to the college, they will talk, right? And then the older one will bring the topic. Do you remember when you were 3 and you and mom and me, we go to the mall and you got lost and we were so worried we look for you. And at first the younger one will say, no, you make it up, I never remember it. But the older one keeps saying it. Will say, no, you're very young and you forget. And that's your dress. You wear a blue skirt, and eventually, while you find the old lady and she hold your hand, you come to us. And she keeps talking. And eventually, she will say, oh yeah, I remember. Even though it never happened. And she will start to add the memory in. She'll add the memory in. Oh, okay, I remember that. I wear a blue skirt. I was so worried. I cried. I feel like I'll never meet you again. Okay, so they're able to convince them, create a false memory. And the experiment does not stop there. After the holiday, and they come back, the professor asks those older siblings, say, what percentage you are able to convince your younger one to have the false memory? And they say about 70 to 80%. They're able to do that. Then the next weekend, the professor recruit those younger ones. That's the interesting part. They recruit the younger one. And this younger one, they go to the professor's experiment lab, and professor explained to them, actually this is a false memory. So explain to them the whole experiment. And the interesting part is this younger one refuse to say this is false memory. They will keep saying, no, I really got lost in the mall. And you are talking about someone else. I know this is false memory experiment, but I swear, I really lost in the mall. Because this become their memory. This become their memory. This happens. And that's why they have the false memory syndrome. Once this become their memory, that's their memory. Okay, let's take a break.